I've never been the type of person to think an object could change my life. A book, maybe. A letter, sure. But a bracelet? No. I mean, it's just jewelry, right? Something shiny you put on your wrist to match an outfit. That's what I thought until the day I found one tucked away in the back of my mom's dresser drawer, hidden so deep under layers of scarves and old receipts that I knew instantly I wasn't supposed to see it. It was a thin silver chain with a tiny charm shaped like a crescent moon, delicate and a little tarnished, the kind of thing you'd think belonged to a teenager, not a grown woman in her late 40s. But what caught my attention wasn't the shape or the style, it was the inscription on the inside of the charm. At first I thought it was some kind of brand name, but no. It was a name. And not just any name. It was my name. My full first name, the way it's written on my birth certificate, etched in the tiniest, neatest letters you could imagine. I picked it up and just stared at it, my stomach doing this weird flip that I couldn't explain. It was beautiful, but it felt wrong. I had never seen this bracelet before in my life. My mom's not the sentimental type, and she definitely doesn't keep mementos. She's practical, organized to the point of obsession, and if something doesn't have a use, it's gone. So why was there a bracelet with my name on it, hidden away like a secret? I didn't even hear her footsteps until she was standing in the doorway. Her voice was calm but sharp, the way it gets when she's caught me doing something I shouldn't. "What are you doing in my room?" she asked, her eyes going straight to my hands. I froze, the bracelet still dangling between my fingers. "I was just looking for a scarf," I said, which was technically true, though I left out the part about how I'd been snooping just a little. She didn't answer right away. She just walked over, took the bracelet from me without touching my skin, and put it back in the drawer like it was nothing. Then she shut the drawer, locked it, I didn't even know that dresser had a lock, and slipped the key into her pocket. "It's nothing," she said, turning away like the conversation was over. "Just an old gift. Now go help your dad with the groceries." And that was that. No explanation. No chance to ask questions. But the thing is, once you've seen something like that, you can't unsee it. The rest of the day I was distracted, barely hearing what my dad said at dinner, barely tasting the food. I kept replaying the moment in my head, the way she'd moved so quickly to take it from me, the way her face had tensed just slightly even though she was trying to look calm. And that name, my name, on something I'd never owned. By the time I went to bed, I decided I needed to know the truth. And if my mom wasn't going to tell me, I'd find out myself. I just didn't realize that the bracelet wasn't just some sentimental trinket. It was a crack in the wall I'd always thought was my family, and once that crack was there, everything I knew was going to start breaking apart. I didn't sleep much that night, just lay there staring at the ceiling and thinking about the way my mom's voice had gone cold. She hadn't even given me the polite fake smile she usually uses when she's brushing me off. No, this had been different. There had been something in her eyes, something like fear. The next morning at breakfast, she acted totally normal, asking me about my plans for the day, reminding me to fill up the car before my evening shift. I almost wanted to blurt out, "Tell me about the bracelet," just to see her reaction, but I knew she'd shut down and I'd be left with even more questions. So I played along, but my mind was spinning. That day I texted my best friend Julia about it. She's the kind of person who loves mysteries and drama, so of course she immediately replied, "OMG, you have to find out where it came from." I told her I'd try, but my mom wasn't exactly an open book. We both laughed about ridiculous possibilities, secret admirer, distant relative, even a cult, but deep down I didn't think this was funny. The bracelet had felt personal. The way it was hidden didn't scream romance, it screamed shame. Over the next few days I started paying more attention to my mom. She was careful, but I caught her glancing at me when she thought I wasn't looking, like she was checking for something. Once, while she was talking to my dad in the kitchen, I walked in and they both went quiet. I told myself I was imagining it, but it kept happening, little pauses, small silences. On the fourth day after finding the bracelet, I decided to search again. I waited until my parents went out to a dinner party, then went into her room. The locked drawer was still locked, of course, but I checked the rest of the dresser. In the bottom drawer, under a pile of old winter clothes, I found a faded envelope with no address. Inside were two photographs, one of a much younger my mom, maybe in her 20s, smiling with her arm around a man I didn't recognize, and another of a newborn baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. My stomach clenched when I realized the baby was me. I could tell from the birthmark on the cheek. But the man holding me wasn't my dad. My breath caught in my throat. My parents met when I was 2, at least. That's what they've always told me. Which meant that man in the photo wasn't just a stranger. He was someone important before my dad came into the picture. I stuffed the photos back into the envelope, my hands shaking, and put it exactly where I found it. I didn't want to get caught again. But now the bracelet wasn't just a mystery. It was connected to this man. I could feel it. That night, lying in bed, I wondered if he was still alive, if he even knew I existed now. And more than that, I wondered why my mom had gone to such lengths to hide him, and why seeing that bracelet had made her look like she'd seen a ghost. Over the next week, I felt like I was living in two separate realities. On the surface, nothing had changed. My mom still made her perfectly timed morning coffee. My dad still read the paper like it was 1995, and I still went to work, came home, and pretended to be my normal self. But under that calm, I was carrying the weight of those photographs, the image of that man holding me as a baby, the knowledge that there was a part of my history no one had told me about. I started watching my parents' interactions more closely. My dad seemed completely unaware, relaxed as ever, but my mom, she was on edge. If I lingered in a room too long when she was on the phone, she'd end the call. If I mentioned anything about my childhood, she'd steer the conversation in another direction. The bracelet stayed locked away, but now I knew there was more in that drawer, and I wanted to see it. One afternoon, I decided to bring up the topic in the safest way I could think of. Casually, over tea in the kitchen. I told her Julia's cousin had found out she was adopted after stumbling on some old documents, just to see her reaction. She froze for half a second before saying, "That's a shame, but it's not something you need to worry about." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That little pause before she answered told me everything. Something about adoption, or maybe a missing parent, was hitting too close to home. Later that night, when I was scrolling through old Facebook albums, I noticed that none of my baby photos were with my dad. In every picture until I was about 2, it was just my mom and me. I'd never questioned it before, but now it screamed omission. I asked my aunt, my mom's sister, about it over text. She responded almost instantly, "Oh, honey, I think that's something you should ask your mom." No emojis, no jokes, just that. Which made it worse. At this point, my brain wouldn't shut off. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's face from the photo, the way he looked down at me like I was the only thing in the world. I didn't know if he was my biological father, but if he wasn't, then who was he? And if he was, what had happened to him? Why had his existence been erased from my life? I started considering that maybe I'd been lied to about more than just this. My birthday, my early childhood, maybe even where we lived back then. And every time I tried to imagine what the bracelet meant in all of this, my chest tightened. Why would he or anyone give my mom a bracelet with my name engraved, only for her to bury it under scarves and lock it away? The more I thought about it, the more it felt like that bracelet was a promise someone had made and broken. I just didn't know yet how badly. It was around this time that my curiosity turned into obsession. I started combing through every old box in the attic, every album tucked away in the hallway closet. Most of it was harmless, school projects, Christmas cards, vacation photos, but it was what I didn't find that stood out. There were no records from the first year of my life except for my birth certificate, and even that felt strange now. I'd looked at it 100 times before when filling out forms, but I had never noticed that the father line was blank. I thought maybe it was a mistake, but when I brought it up casually to my mom, she just said, "They must have left it out at the hospital. Paperwork errors happen." I wanted to believe her, but the way she didn't meet my eyes told me she knew I didn't. A few days later, Julia convinced me to dig deeper. She said if my mom was hiding something, it had to be because she didn't want me to know who that man was. And if I could find out his name, I could figure out the rest. That night, while my parents were watching TV downstairs, I quietly went into their bedroom again. This time, I was prepared. I'd brought a paperclip, which I'd straightened out, hoping I could pick the lock on the dresser. It took longer than I expected, and my hands were sweating so badly I almost gave up. But then I heard the click, and the drawer slid open. Inside, there were a few old receipts, a scarf, and a small wooden box. I opened the box and found the bracelet again, gleaming faintly in the dim light. Underneath it was a folded piece of paper so worn it was almost soft. I opened it carefully, and my heart pounded when I saw it was a letter. The handwriting was messy, rushed, but the words were clear. She has your eyes. I wish things could be different. Please tell her about me when she's old enough. M. I stood there frozen, reading it over and over. She has your eyes. That meant me. And, was that the man from the photo? My head was spinning. I barely had time to put everything back before I heard footsteps on the stairs. I locked the drawer again and ran to my room, my hands shaking so badly I could barely text Julia. She told me it was obvious. M was my real father, and my mom had never told me about him. I lay awake that night staring at the bracelet in my mind, that little crescent moon charm with my name, wondering if it had been from him. Wondering why, if he cared enough to write that letter, he wasn't here. But deep down, I was starting to realize the answer might be worse than I wanted to believe. After finding that letter, I couldn't focus on anything else. At work, I'd zone out and forget what customers had ordered. At home, I'd find myself drifting to my mom's room just to stand outside the door, wondering what other secrets were locked inside that drawer. I kept going back to the words, she has your eyes. I wish things could be different. Please tell her about me when she's old enough. Whoever M was, he wanted me to know about him. And my mom had ignored that. She'd hidden his bracelet, hidden his letter, and pretended he never existed. I started to wonder if my dad knew. One night, when my mom was at her book club, I tried to bring it up to him without being obvious. I asked what it was like when he first met me, if it was weird dating someone with a kid. He smiled, said I'd been easy to love from the start, that it felt natural. But when I asked about my first year, his face changed. He said, that's a better question for your mom, then changed the subject to a news story. That was the moment I knew. He didn't know everything either. Which meant this secret was hers alone. Julia told me I should just confront her, but I wasn't ready yet. I needed more. The next week, I went back to the attic. I'd searched there before, but this time I went through the boxes more methodically. Near the bottom of one stack, I found a dusty shoebox that rattled when I moved it. Inside were random keepsakes, movie ticket stubs, an old lighter, a keychain with a faded logo, and at the very bottom, a Polaroid. It was my mom again, younger, leaning against a car. And there he was, M. I didn't need anyone to tell me it was the same man from the baby photo. But what caught my breath was the fact that in this photo, his arm was around my mom, and she was wearing the bracelet. My bracelet. The one with my name on it. The timestamp in the corner of the Polaroid was from a few months after I was born. They had been together then. Which made me wonder, what happened? Why had he disappeared so completely? I searched online for his face, using every clue I had, but nothing came up. No social media, no news articles, nothing. It was like he had been erased. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the possibility that maybe he hadn't left willingly. Maybe he couldn't come back. And if that was the case, then my mom wasn't just hiding a love story gone wrong, she was hiding something much darker. I couldn't shake the idea that M hadn't just walked away. It was too neat, too final, and the way my mom reacted whenever I touched the edges of the topic made it clear she wasn't just keeping an old heartbreak to herself, she was protecting something. Or hiding it. The next move I made was stupid, but I couldn't help it. I called my aunt and told her I'd found some old photos and wanted to know more about the man in them. There was a pause on the line, and then she said quietly, "Sweetheart, I think you should let your mother be the one to explain." I pushed, asking if he was my father, and after another long silence, she said, "Yes, but it's not that simple," before hanging up. That "not that simple" replayed in my head for days. What could be so complicated that my entire life had been rewritten to avoid it? That week, I started looking into old newspaper archives online, narrowing the dates to the year I was born. I didn't know what I was searching for exactly. A wedding announcement, a birth notice, maybe even a missing person case. After hours of scrolling, one headline made my chest tighten: "Local man missing after mysterious accident near riverbank." The article was brief, but the photo with it made my stomach drop. It was him. M. He had been last seen driving home late at night, his car found abandoned near the river, the driver's door open, no sign of him. The date was when I was about 6 months old. I sat there staring at the screen, my hands cold. If he had gone missing then, it meant my mom had been raising me alone for months before meeting my dad. But the bracelet, the letter, they showed he had cared. He had wanted me to know him. So why had she buried all trace of him? I thought about confronting her right then, but part of me was scared of what she would say. Because if he had vanished, there were only two possibilities. Either something terrible had happened to him that she didn't want to relive, or she knew more about his disappearance than she had ever admitted. And in that moment, I realized the truth about the bracelet, whatever it meant, was tied directly to why he never came back. I waited 2 more days before I confronted her, and those were the longest 2 days of my life. Every time she walked into the room, I felt like I was staring at a stranger wearing my mother's face. On the 3rd night, after my dad went to bed, I told her I needed to talk. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands folded, her expression unreadable. I didn't waste time. I told her I knew about M, that I'd seen the photos, the letter, the bracelet, and that I knew he had gone missing when I was a baby. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't blink. Then she let out a slow breath and said, "I was hoping I could keep you from this." I asked if he was my father. She nodded once. I asked why she had never told me about him. She looked down at her hands and said, "Because the truth wouldn't help you. It would only hurt you." I pushed harder, asking what happened to him. That's when she looked me in the eyes, and for the first time in my life, I saw something like guilt there. She told me they had been together since before I was born, that he had given her the bracelet the day I came home from the hospital, said it was so I'd always have a piece of him. But things between them had gotten bad. He had problems, anger, drinking, disappearing for days. She said the night he went missing, they had fought. He'd been drunk, accusing her of ruining his life, shouting so loud the neighbors heard. She said he left the house, and that was the last time she saw him. But when I asked if she was telling me everything, she hesitated. My stomach dropped. Finally she said, "He grabbed you that night. Out of the crib. He said he was taking you with him, that I'd never see you again." I panicked. "We struggled, and I got you back, but he hit his head. He was bleeding. I left him there and ran with you. When I went back, he was gone." My chest felt tight, my ears ringing. I asked if she had told the police. She shook her head. They would have blamed me. And maybe they'd be right. I don't know if he made it out of there alive. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. That was why she had locked away the bracelet. It wasn't just a reminder of him, it was a reminder of that night, of what she had done, of what she might have caused. I didn't know what to say. She reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of the bracelet in my mind heavier than anything I'd ever worn. It had been meant as a promise from a father to his daughter, and now it was proof of a story I could never tell without destroying my family. I still have it, hidden in my own drawer now. Sometimes I take it out and trace my name with my fingertip, wondering if M ever thought about me in those last moments. Wondering if somewhere along the riverbank, the truth about him and about my mother is still waiting to be found.